Greetings, I'm Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm visiting the Queensland Maritime Museum in Brisbane, located at the eastern end of South Bank. You can see the main attraction, HMAS Diamantina, a river-class frigate, from the Goodwill Bridge, which is where I took these shots from, and that is pretty cool, but it's much cooler to go into the museum and go aboard the ship. Before you can get to Diamantina though, you've got to go through the indoor portion of the museum. This was my first visit, and second visit, technically, and I was kind of surprised by how much stuff they have in here. There are so many interesting and cool things to see. While I am obviously fascinated, I'm not an expert or even knowledgeable on any of these things, so I won't pretend to be. Nor does my video really capture everything as well as an in-person visit does, and there is almost certainly something I've missed. In fact, my phone was running low on battery when we eventually got out to Diamantina, but I think I did a good job of capturing a lot of the cool stuff. Still, I would recommend visiting in person. It's much better than any video could be. But do keep watching this video. Maybe I should keep my waffling to a minimum. Yes, I think I'll do that. We were told that this boat has never even been in the water, which I find quite amusing. It was very tempting to ring the bell. It's my understanding that this bell is a replica from the Maheno, a well-known shipwreck on Gari, formerly Fraser Island. The first thing you'll probably notice in this room is the huge lighthouse light in the centre. It's really noticeable. I guess that's the point of lighthouse lights, isn't it? It's like a much bigger, cooler version of a disco ball. There's also some really interesting representations of old ship cabins. I'm not sure what ships they're from, or if they're even from specific ships. They could just be random generic cabins, but to be honest, they don't look all that uncomfortable. I could deal with that. Maybe these were the expensive tickets. Whatever the case, they're interesting to see. This building was originally one of the workshops, part of the old graving dock, or dry dock or whatever you'd prefer to call it, which was built in the 1800s. There's a whole bunch of old tools they would have used back in those days, like these rivets and associated riveting tools. Barnaby and I did have a good, sensible chuckle about rivet counters here. Seriously though, there's a lot of really interesting old tools here. It's amazing what they got done with them. There was also quite a lot of lights, lots of information about lighthouses and things like that. This area was much darker in person, which did make it a more effective display, so this is one of those things where the phone camera just doesn't really capture the magic. The main feature of this room is a torpedo. I believe this is an American one. This is the kind of thing where, you know in your mind that a torpedo is probably rather big, but it's so much bigger than you think when you see it in person. I also didn't really think it would have switches on it, though it does make sense. Very cool to see this kind of thing close up. And from this room, we step outside. There's a lot of stuff out here too. You'll have to forgive the inconsistent camera settings here. I missed a bunch of stuff on the first day for reasons, including low battery, so I came back another time. No regrets though. It's a very cool museum, so I'm happy to go multiple times. I'll probably go again in the future too. There's a small memorial here. Remember when I used to make memorial videos? It does make sense to have one here. This place did have a part in both world wars. I'm assuming the ships listed were repaired at the dry dock here at some point. If you are interested in memorials, there is a couple more in the area that I think are publicly accessible and within walking distance. This sensible little thing is happy too. One of the smallest vessels to cross the Pacific Ocean. I can't imagine making that trip in this thing. It's not quite 3 meters long, so incredibly cramped. I probably couldn't even fit in there. Obviously the dry dock is right there with Diamantina and the lightship, but there is still a lot of other stuff to look at. I wasn't really expecting to see a railway wagon at the Maritime Museum, but it does make sense. The wharves that used to be here are where coal trains from the mines further west were unloaded onto ships for export overseas. I suspect they would have also used the coal to power the boilers for the pump house and things like that too. This certainly is a red ocean buoy. I don't think that ladder down there is the original method for boarding the lightship. The lightship is quite interesting. I understand 4 of these were built in 1917 and were in service until the mid-80s. This one sank in the 2011 floods right here in this dry dock. If you're an Australian, you've probably heard of this boat, Ella's Pink Lady. This was sailed around the world by a young lady named Jessica Watson when she was 16. It was quite a big deal at the time. There's a replica of the cabin that you can go aboard. It's suspended on something, so it kind of moves when you walk around on it. Obviously it's a bit more spacious and comfortable than Happy too, but I personally would really not enjoy being aboard this for the couple of 100 days the journey took. Still really cool to see though. I'm not really sure why this is called Puff the Magic Dragon, but I really like the art painted on the side. I mean, it would be more suited to an old steam shovel or something, but this thing is still really interesting. I need something like this on my model railway. This sign talks about how the dry dock was used for things like swimming carnivals until the mid-1930s, which seems funny, but when you think about it, there probably weren't all that many big pools back then, so it's probably better than swimming in the river. Here's the dry dock gate. Well, I think it's actually more of a wall, really. It does look pretty permanent. Obviously, this is not the original equipment. The original caisson failed in 1998. Quite impressive that it lasted that long. There is still a section of the original that we'll see in a moment. This replacement structure was completed in 2006. I videoed this on the day they were doing the river fire practice runs with the C-17. The Maritime Museum being a pretty good place to see that from. I mean, it's not quite as good a vantage as some of the bigger buildings where you can look down on the plane, but it's still pretty cool to see. At least, if like me, you were impressed by big loud machines. The pump house is this way. This was encased in a concrete blockhouse during World War II to protect it from bombing. I assume prior to that, it was mostly open, though one of the signs inside does mention a corrugated iron roof. There's a good collection of tools and machinery in here, including a weird little car, which I assume was used for towing and pushing things around. There is a big hole in the wall, and I don't know if that's intentional or not, but it does let you see how thick the concrete is. Come with me down the steps into the boiler room itself. It's not too dark or creepy. There are 3 Cornish boilers here, and I believe these were installed in 1906. Then in the mid-20s, 1920s, 2 of the boilers were replaced with electric motors. They really do mean low doorway. This leads down into the pump room, where the pumps are. In case you are not familiar with this kind of pump, there's a sign telling you what the different coloured parts mean. It took these pumps about 4 hours to empty the dry dock. Exiting the pump house and turning right, we find a collection of cannons. I thought I had some better shots of these, especially from the front, but apparently I don't. Back to the graving dock where, in front of Diamantina, we find a sign with a bunch of information about the ship. It's interesting to note how different this end of the dry dock looks compared to the other end, where it was extended. You can read about that on this sign here. It mentions the extension was constructed with natural rock with no lining, the lining in the original section being proven unnecessary. Here's a section of the original caisson. You can kind of see from this little section that it's a bit like a boat. You would be forgiven for thinking, if you don't know, that a dry dock might just have a big gate to keep the water out. The caisson is a bit more like a boat than a gate or a door. It was simply filled with water and sunk in place to close the dry dock, then emptied and floated out of the way when it wasn't needed. I don't know about you, but I find that very interesting. Here's a lighthouse. This is a timber-framed ironclad lighthouse, which sounds a lot tougher than it looks. This one was previously located at Bulwer Island, which is a bit further down the river near Fort Lytton. I was kind of startled when everything powered on when I stepped inside, but better me being startled than constantly wasting electricity. There is a lot of lighthouse history at this museum. Makes sense, it's a maritime museum. It's finally time for the part you've probably all been waiting for. We go aboard the Diamantina, which I believe is one of 2 surviving river-class frigates. There are 3 boarding ramps. This one leads us onto the quarterdeck, where there's a pair of these anti-air guns. I believe these are 40mm Bofors. You can probably tell in single mounts. There's another one at the front of the ship. Unfortunately, I didn't get a good shot of that. One of the things I like about this museum is that it's both self-guided, and you can get right up close and touch a lot of the equipment. These handles move, but nothing happens, which is both understandable and a little bit disappointing. I imagine if you could move these guns, that the shade things would interfere with them. I do wish I'd got a few more close-up detail shots of these. Sorry, rivet counters, you'll just have to come and visit yourself. Kurt Cobain POV. Sorry, I had to. The quarterdeck is also where you'll find all the depth charge launching doodatery. Doodatery is the technical term, by the way. The ship has 3 of these depth charge throwers. K-guns? I think they're K-guns. I'm pretty sure there should be 4. That would make more sense. They would have been removed when the ship was a research vessel, so I assume the museum hasn't been able to find a 4th one. If you've got one laying around, maybe donate it. Diamantina's quarterdeck is also historically significant in that a handful of Japanese surrenders were signed here. That's a pretty cool piece of history. This is the first room we entered. Cabin? Room? Whatever. It's certainly not the most cramped aboard, but this ship was clearly not designed with the comfortable movement of larger fellows in mind. There's a lot of information in this room, as well as this radar dish. I'm pretty sure this is not the original location. This unintentionally flashing light is probably not original equipment either. Here's an ammunition hoist, so this probably means we're somewhere below the rear gun mount. Not being a shipsman, I did find it quite easy to get lost, even though it's not a very big ship. Good thing there's a lot to see, no matter which way you go. This is the engine room. They very much don't want you to go down the ladder where all of the interesting pipes and doodaddery are, which is probably fair. There's also a bunch of signs that say not to walk on top of the engines, which, again, probably fair. There's also a lot of asbestos-containing material. Diamantina was built in the 1940s, so that also makes sense. Unless you're scraping it and making it airborne, it's probably fairly safe. I'll take the risk. The two engines here are 4-cylinder triple expansion steam engines, powered by steam, obviously, from an oil-fired boiler. The tops of the cylinders on the right engine have been lifted a bit, so you can kind of see what's going on in there. It's very interesting to look at and get to see, even if we can't go down to the lower level. I would imagine while in use that this was a very noisy and uncomfortably warm room to work in. Even in May, when this part of the video was filmed, it was a little too warm for my liking. I don't know what steam drenching is, but you'd better not do it. You can't go down there, that's where they keep all the noise. Here's the boiler. There's a clear plastic barrier in the way, so you can't go in. And to be fair, I don't think I would really fit anyway, so I don't want to go in there, but it's still cool to have a look. Look at this creeper. This did kind of startle me when I laid eyes upon it. No sir, I don't like it. The sick bay is another place that's blocked off. It is a very interesting room though. I understand that most ships of this size would have only had a medic, but Diamantina had its own doctor aboard. I guess if you get sufficiently injured, it's probably pretty good to have an actual doctor around. It seems a little bit weird to me to have a shop with no sink or anything like that, just sitting above a shelf, but again, I'm not a Navy person, so maybe that's normal. Here's the wardroom for the officers. It's certainly one of the more comfortable rooms aboard Diamantina, but you've still got to watch your head. I found it kind of amusing that the captain wasn't allowed in here except by invitation, but I guess it makes sense. It seemed appropriate, and it is comfortable enough, so Barnaby and I sat and relaxed here for a while. This thing, in its caged-off room, is the gyro compass. It says so on that sheet of paper over there. A sheet of paper wouldn't lie to us. Here's where I've added a couple of shots from my second, much less comprehensive visit. I still didn't manage to capture everything, but there's a few clips from the lower rear compartments that we didn't see the first time. Here's that ammo hoist again. Here's some of the steering equipment. I would have liked to be able to go in there, but again, it's blocked off by clear barriers. That is still a lot better than simply having the door closed. Even though, like that sign suggests, the steering probably isn't going to suddenly move, it's probably still kind of dangerous in there. This is where they kept food stores. It is kind of a long way from the galley, which is up in the superstructure. I guess there's probably more stores up there. Now we travel back to May. Let's go for a walk toward the bow. There's the galley. I thought I had some clips of that, and we did go in there. I would have gone in there on my second visit, but I assumed I had some video. I guess you'll just have to come and have a look for yourself. I would say this is one of the main attractions on Diamantina. The forward 4-inch gun mount. I didn't manage to get any video of the rear gun mount, but they are pretty much the same thing. The cool thing about these is the handles work, though it is kind of hard to do one-handed while holding a camera gimbal. But look, we're rotating. I'm sure it could be rotated faster by somebody sufficiently motivated. Barnaby was not, but that's okay. It also elevates and depresses. I really appreciate that the museum lets the public play with this. They could just as easily lock it up and barricade it. I'm glad they don't. Here's the bridge. Is this the bridge? There is more bridge stuff on the deck above, so maybe this is just the steering room. Would you believe I'm not an expert on this kind of thing? Either way though, this is really interesting looking. And here's the upper bridge. This is mostly just a place for the captain to observe and give orders from, right? That's what those yelling tubes are for. Surely it still counts as bridge. You can also see that third anti-air gun just forward of the bridge. Located just behind the bridge, or maybe it's considered part of the bridge, is the radar operator's cabin. I imagine this would have had the door closed while it was in use, thus it would probably be quite hot and cramped. Not an enviable position. I suppose at least you could come out and get some fresh air pretty quickly, if they let you. It's a pretty good view from up here. In retrospect, this would have been a really good place to watch those planes fly over. Maybe next year. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Editing this, I'm a little bit disappointed in myself for missing some of the things and not getting more video. But as I mentioned, on the first day I was running very low on battery and blood sugar, and on the second day I didn't really have time. Also, I am old and crap, so climbing about a ship like this did take quite a bit out of me, so I do apologise for the couple of things I have missed. It does kind of sound like I'm complaining, but I very much enjoyed the Maritime Museum, and I will almost certainly go again, though I will probably just enjoy it without a camera. As I've been saying, if you want to see everything, I very much recommend you come and visit the museum yourself. It's certainly worth it, and museums like this do count on, and in my opinion, deserve, support from people visiting. Not only do you get to see and go aboard Diamantina, but there is so much inside to look at that you'll almost certainly need the entire day. Entry's pretty cheap. At the time I visited, it was $18 per adult and $8 per child. I'm sure there's also discounts for families and, obviously, concession card holders. The Maritime Museum is open Wednesday to Sunday from 10 AM till 4:15 PM, except of course for the usual public holidays like Anzac Day, Good Friday, New Year's, and over Christmas. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll be inspired to visit if you get the chance. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments section below. Subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of thing, share the video with anybody you think might find it interesting, and if you really like what I do and you want to see videos a bit early, consider supporting on Patreon or Ko-fi. Links are in the description. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.